Hey there. Ready to really dig into some history?
I'm ready. What are we diving into today?
Well, you sent over this video transcript, right? About history lessons.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And it seems like you're looking for more than just, dates and names.
Right, exactly.
You want like the why. Why even study history? Like
Mm,
where does all this information come from and how can we even trust it?
such good questions.
Mm,
It's easy to get bogged down in the details.
totally. So, we're here to unpack all of that with you today.
Absolutely. We're going way beyond the textbook.
Yeah, less memorizing, more like we're piecing together a giant puzzle. Right.
Exactly. And the clues are seriously everywhere, from like ancient trash to,
Wait, trash. People keep that kind of stuff.
oh, yeah, you'd be amazed what survives. It's like a time capsule. Think broken pottery, old tools, even leftover food. We can learn so much from that.
Wow, okay. So it's like those history shows where they're digging up like Roman baths or something?
Kind of, but it can be even more everyday stuff too.
Uh-huh.
And it's not just objects either. The words we use every day.
Wait, what? How can words be clues to the past?
Language changes over time, right? So by tracing those changes back, we can learn about how people lived, what they valued, all kinds of things.
Okay, you've definitely got my attention. So let's unpack this idea of history as a puzzle. Your video mentioned the ancient world, which is like massive. We're talking from like the first humans
The
to
fall of the Roman Empire, yeah, it's a lot.
a lot. But before we even get there, don't we need to define what history is?
We do, that's crucial. Because is it just a list of kings and queens, battles? Or is it something more?
Right, because the video you sent, it emphasizes that idea of history as a process.
Exactly. It's about how we even got to where we are today.
Yeah, history isn't just about the past, it's about understanding the present.
Through the lens of the past, yes.
So to understand the world today, we need to understand things like the Roman Empire.
The invention of writing, how people lived thousands of years ago. All of it.
Okay, so that's where the real detective work begins.
It is, because we need evidence, right? And that's where historical sources come in.
So those are like the clues.
Exactly. Think of it like a giant game of Clue, but instead of Colonel Mustard.
We're trying to figure out like ancient Egypt or something.
Exactly. And just like in Clue, not all clues are created equal.
Okay, so break it down for us. What kinds of clues are we talking about here?
Okay, so the video mentions written sources, things like chronicles, official documents, even graffiti.
Graffiti,
Yeah.
that's a historical source.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Imagine someone, 2,000 years ago scribbling on a wall. It's a direct message from the past.
Wild. Okay, so that's written sources. What else is there?
Well, we've got unwritten sources too. Artifacts, art, even oral histories.
Hold on, oral histories. How can we possibly know what people said thousands of years ago if it wasn't written down?
That's where things get really interesting. Think about it this way. There are cultures today with traditions passed down orally for generations. Right?
Yeah. Right, like stories or songs.
Exactly. That's the world of ethnography and anthropology, where we study living cultures to understand the past.
So by studying those cultures, we can kind of get a glimpse into how people might have lived back then.
Precisely. It's like finding a piece of a puzzle, right? You might not have the whole picture.
But it gives you an idea of what the bigger picture could be. Okay, that makes sense.
It's all about connecting those dots.
But what about those written sources? Anyone can write anything down, right? How can we be sure it's true, especially stuff written so long ago?
You've hit on a crucial point. Not all sources are created equal. And that's where historical criticism comes in. We can't just take everything at face value.
So it's like fact-checking, but for history.
Exactly. And the video actually uses a great example. You
Mhm.
familiar with Herodotus?
Vaguely. Refresh my memory.
He's often called the father of history, right?
Yeah.
And he wrote us out some really fascinating stuff. Like, he described a species of giant ants in India that unearthed gold dust when they dug their mounds.
Wait, giant ants? I'm picturing like a horror movie, not a history book.
Right. And that's exactly why we have to remember that sources, even ancient ones, can be biased, contain errors, or even be straight-up forgeries.
Wow, forgeries, like someone just making stuff up.
Sometimes. Or exaggerated the truth for their own reasons.
So how do we tell the giant ants from, actual history?
That's where things get really interesting.
So how do we tell the giant ants from, actual history?
It's all about corroboration, which basically means comparing different sources. We're looking for patterns, things that confirm or deny the information.
So if one guy is like, I saw a giant ant, but nobody else did.
Exactly. Probably not true. But if we find, say, two separate accounts of a battle, right? written by different people in different locations.
But they both describe, like, the same details.
Exactly. That makes it way more likely that the battle actually happened.
Okay, so it's like having multiple witnesses to, like, a crime or something. Makes sense.
Right. And the more those accounts line up, the more confident we can be in the information.
Okay, so going back to those sources, those clues, the video mentions something about, like, language itself being a source.
Oh, yeah. That's linguistics. It's a huge part of understanding history.
Okay, but how does that even work?
Well, by analyzing how languages evolve, we can trace words back to their roots.
Okay.
And that can tell us so much about how people lived and what they valued. For example, imagine we're studying a word for, like, a specific tool.
Okay, like a hammer or something.
Sure. So we track how that word has changed over time, what it's come to mean, how it's used in different contexts.
And that tells us something about how important that tool was to them.
Exactly. Or maybe it reveals something about their beliefs or their relationship to the natural world even. It's fascinating.
So even the words we use today can hold clues to the past. That's wild. It's like hidden in plain sight. But how can we be sure those interpretations are accurate?
That's the challenge, isn't it? We can't always be 100% certain, but by carefully analyzing those sources, cross-referencing information, and considering the context,
We can get pretty close.
we can get as close to the truth as possible. And that's what's so exciting about studying history. It's like being a detective, piecing together these clues to solve a mystery.
Except the mystery is, like, the past.
Exactly. And it's a mystery we're still unraveling today.
So we've talked about how to study history, right? The different tools, the approaches.
The detective work.
But your video also talked about something else, the importance of history. Beyond just, satisfying our curiosity. It's about more than just knowing what happened, right? It's like all of a sudden, I'm seeing the world differently.
That's the power of history, right?
Yeah.
It gives us context, helps us understand not just the past, but ourselves.
So it's more than just, like, knowing the kings and queens, the dates of battle.
Way more. It's about understanding the why behind it all. Why did those things happen? What were people thinking? How did it shape the world we live in?
And knowing that helps us make better decisions today.
Exactly. It's like history doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes,
Yeah.
So by studying the past, we can start to see patterns, understand the potential consequences of our actions.
Oh, okay. So, like, we were talking about the Roman Empire earlier. Knowing how and why it fell could, like, help us avoid making similar mistakes today.
Precisely. Or, say, we're trying to solve a problem like climate change. We can look back at how past societies dealt with environmental challenges, what worked, what didn't. It can give us a roadmap for the future.
Wow, that's actually, like, kind of hopeful.
It is. History can feel heavy sometimes,
Yeah.
but it can also be incredibly inspiring.
Oh, yeah. Think about all the incredible people who lived before us, all the amazing things they accomplished.
Exactly. And we're all part of that story. We're all carrying that torch.
This deep dive has really, like, shifted my whole perspective on history, I gotta say. It's not just, like, a boring subject we study in the school.
It's alive. It's happening all around us.
And it's up to us to learn from it to make the world a better place.
Couldn't have said it better myself. We're all making history every single day.
So true. Well, on that note, a huge thank you to expert speaker for, like, blowing our minds today.
Always a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and leave us a review. We'll see you next time for another fascinating journey through history.